You are listening to Founders Circle Signal, a Founders Circle and Ad Club Bangalore initiative. 30 minutes with one senior leader from India's advertising, marketing, and communication industries. I'm Suneet John, and here is today's signal. We have with us today Nirmalya Sen. Nirmalya, I'd like to start with you sharing a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Hi, Suneet. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be on Signal. My name is Nirmalya Sen. I run an agency called the Rethink Company. About 6 years back, my wife and I had this, if not now, when moment, and decided to start my own company. Before I started Rethink, I used to run 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀 in India. And before I ran 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀 in India, I was running 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝗍𝗿, the advertising business of 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝗍𝗿. I was also the head of the disruption practice there. So that's pretty much about me.
Can you tell me a little bit about the philosophy behind your company and
Well,
how is it different?
As the name suggests, the Rethink Company, and my sort of experience with disruption as a philosophy while I was in 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝗍𝗿. See, once you think the disruption way, it sort of gets ingrained in you. It becomes very difficult to then go back to thinking the usual way, So
Correct.
you always tend to think in terms of what are the conventions, and therefore what is the conventional view of this, and therefore how can you do it differently? How can you disrupt this profitably, and so on? So that's pretty much what our approach was when we started the Rethink Company. In fact, when we started, our entire focus was on what needs to change. Because I had come fresh from a ringside view of how a medium-sized agency network works, how it thinks, how it approaches people, how it approaches expenses, how it positions itself or doesn't, how it promotes itself or doesn't. And so therefore there were a lot of sort of areas where I felt we could agencies could sort of do differently. So that was one area that we focused on, the things that need to change. And then there were areas where sort of change was thrust upon us, and we had to react to change. For instance, we were pretty much a COVID baby.
Right.
And therefore we had to quickly sort of adapt to a whole new way of working, even before we had established any way of working. So, and then this whole entire AI wave sort of came in. And so the whole focus was on how do you need to sort of stay abreast with the change that is happening around you. So really this focus was on what are the things that need to change, and therefore design a way of thinking or way of doing that is different or addresses that need to change. I mean, today we view it slightly differently. I mean, right now, actually, our focus is on what we should definitely not change, because I think that the industry as a whole sort of needs to think that as well, because with what AI has done or is doing to our business, the entire area of generating content or creativity is now completely democratized. It's no longer just the agency's purview. The agency is only one of the forces that is creating content or creating stuff. Everyone is now, including the client, right? So
very true.
Yeah. So
very true.
In going ahead, I think what will make the agency irreplaceable is two things. One is trust. If a client trusts that you have the brand's interest above anything else, right? And the other is the fundamentals. They need to believe that you can bring focus back on the brand. You can be the brand's conscience.
Correct.
You can help it build meaning, or you can ensure strategic clarity in a situation where there are so many people creating work on it. So
correct.
So right now we are focusing on what are the things we should not change in the way the business used to be at one point in time. So bring the fundamentals back in place. In fact, interestingly, one of the, I can't call them a client yet because they haven't signed on the dotted line, but let's say prospects who want to engage with us, want us to come on board as the brand's conscience. The whole task is to drive strategy and to ensure that the brand stays on course, irrespective of the fact that there are different agencies working on the brand.
It's actually a really interesting thing that you pointed out, right? So what started off as disruption has now become preservation. Brands are looking at preserving those core values.
Correct.
Because everything else has turned to AI. So who holds the core of the brand at the end of the day, right? If everything is getting...
Absolutely.
So would that be a correct evaluation of that?
Absolutely.
All right, great. The question to you is, what makes you jump out of bed every morning? What drives you?
I think I'm one of those people who is sort of permanently infatuated by advertising. So if you're permanently infatuated, then you behave in a certain manner. It sort of goes beyond the realm of reason, and so everything that is new, there is this obsession to try and figure out, and even if you're not going to use it,
correct.
But there's a desire to want to know at least what's happening.
Excellent.
So I think that's what keeps me going.
Excellent. Talk me through the last decision where your instinct said one thing and the numbers said another. Which one did you follow and what happened?
Okay. So when we started the Rethink company, I wasn't the only advertising person who was starting out on their own. Quite a few of my friends were turning their sort of individual reputations and experience into companies of their own, right? Some had been already around for a while by then. So if you went by the numbers, they were all following the traditional model of building an agency. Beautiful offices that made them stand out and make a statement, or co-founders across all key disciplines, or multifunctional teams. To be honest, I was tempted as well. Who does not want a nice office that will reflect the values of your brand? When you're called the Rethink company, there's so much you can do with your office, right? Correct. Or who doesn't want the luxury of having a large team that will sort of ensure you have the bandwidth for everything, for growth and for everything else. But we chose to go a slightly different model. We went a low fixed cost model. So while we have a core team that is on our rolls, and we also have a bunch of specialists who work with us regularly on projects, that way we can handpick people we want to work with depending on the nature of the project. Also we can work with people we like and truly admire, who we would otherwise have to give an arm and a leg to hire.
For sure.
Right. So the other thing is, the talent pool is therefore spread across cities, but we have just one office in Mumbai. So all this sort of also means that we do not have large costs that we have to pass on to our clients to profit. It's a slightly different model, which is anchored in a low fixed cost.
It's actually the best way to do it, right? Because what you're basically doing is then you're bringing expertise to a specific client who has a specific problem.
Correct.
Right?
To the problem, a specific problem more than a specific client,
Correct. So then you become super specialists in solving that problem for that client.
Correct. Within a generalist environment, while you are offering everything, but for that client, it's a specialist sort of
Correct.
solution.
Absolutely. Agency founders have a personal definition of good work that sometimes does not match what their pitch deck says. What is yours?
I find that a little difficult to understand. Because if you can't be yourself at a pitch, when else will you be? A pitch is where you sort of put out what you genuinely believe in. And that's what a client buys into, right? If you approach the pitch from the point of view of what you think the client wants to hear, then even if you win, you sort of land yourselves in a world of ongoing compromises and conflict. Because you will have to continue to toe the line despite not necessarily believing that you're doing the right thing or doing your best, right?
Correct. What's your point of view on the fact, mostly the fact that most pitches, the work created for a pitch by most agencies, very rarely see the light of day?
Correct. Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the reasons we usually do not pitch. Most of our clients, in fact, almost all of our clients that we work with or have worked with are from references by existing clients or ex-clients. So if we pitch, it is only where we know the key decision maker is fair. So when we pitched for Dr. Oetker Fun Foods, it was like a multi-agency pitch, but there was this gentleman called 𝗙𝗪𝗂 who was the CMO, who had a reputation for being fair and being a true partner to the agency. So I said yes, we will pitch. I mean, we won the business, and after 6 years, we continue to still work with them. So we get into pitches only if we know for certain that the pitch will even be decided. A lot of pitches that are also never even decided. But to respond to your question, in any situation where in a pitch there are between, let's say, 3 to 15 agencies participating, right? But there's one agency that wins.
Correct.
Right? So that's the work that very senior people across so many agencies put in, a lot of time and effort into creating, into doing audits, into doing pitch decks, into creating the work, into chemistry meetings, and so on and so forth. Right? Imagine if they used all of that precious time in doing more work on existing clients or on creating IPs or
Correct.
Creating new products. All of that time the industry is sort of losing.
Correct. Very true. Very, very true.
So I think we have become very comfortable being unpaid labor.
So what's your take on getting clients to pay for a pitch?
I think that's a wonderful thing to happen, but in all my years, I have had one pitch where the client paid agencies to participate, and that was a result of the nature of the client, right? He wrote an invite to all the agencies he was sort of asking to pitch, saying it's not in our culture to get work done for free, so we would like to pay you so much amount towards the pitch, right? Well, that's one client I have come across in so many years. I think if that has to happen at an industry level, because I can go and tell any client that I will pitch only if you pay me. He will say, okay, thank you so much. I've got 15 others who are willing to pitch.
Correct. That's why you have LinkedIn.
Exactly. That's the new business engine.
All right, moving on. What business model do you reach for when a client wants you to do something you believe is wrong for them?
This question reminds me of a very dear colleague who we unfortunately lost to COVID. I mean, he went very early. His name was 𝗙𝗪𝗏. He was on my team while I was in Mudra, Delhi. And then he was later my client when he was the head of marketing for Nokia. So he used to tell his clients or our clients, who were being unreasonable, saying, look, my job is to continue to tell you what we believe is right. After that, if you still want to burn your money, I can burn it better and faster than anyone. So if you want me to burn your money, I'll do it. But our advice is please don't do it. So the thing is, clients don't just buy our recommendation; they buy the consequences of that decision. In a situation like this, I try and sense the degree of danger of doing the wrong thing. If it is truly harmful, then I will persist. But if it is really not, then I might just let it pass, because at the end of the day, every client sort of deserves the work they buy.
What is the conversation happening inside Indian client procurement rooms that agencies have not adjusted to as yet?
Having been in many frustrating negotiation meetings with procurement and losing pitches where we were told our strategy was the best or our work was the best, but we lost out on price. I cannot claim to have a very kind view of procurement managers, but it is also true that procurement did not destroy agency economics. That we did ourselves, right? That our agency economics was already broken because of the way we run our agencies, and because of our desperation to win, because you're willing to sort of undercut each other and so on. What procurement simply did was to notice that and do their job well, right?
Correct.
I think what we should focus more on is what is the conversation that is probably happening inside procurement rooms right now, which is sort of more fundamental. I think it is what they're probably discussing is if they need an agency at all to do what marketing needs done. Because there is so much that an agency used to do that a lot of other people can do today. The question they probably ask themselves is, do they really need an agency?
Which agency capability that your firm was hired for, say, 5 years ago, no longer earns the fee it used to? And what are you charging for instead?
I think earlier, even 6 years back, information used to command a premium, but it no longer does. Clients hired agencies who could bring them knowledge, in terms of consumer trends, category audits, competitive audits, channel expertise. Today, a lot of that is accessible to everyone, right? So there
Correct.
stands to reason that they would not want to pay for it. So the premium, I think, has shifted from information to other eyes. One is interpretation, and the other is imagination. So it's about interpreting that information in a manner, sort of, that helps you imagine a bigger or a better sort of future for your brand. So I think that's where the premium is going to shift. Information is no longer commanding any premium. There's actually another way to look at this. There is, I forget who, there's someone who used to say this quite often, that there's a difference between creativity and creative labor. So we have historically, as an industry, monetized labor, right? So hours, team structure, time sheets.
Yes.
No, but labor is increasingly becoming easier to access and cheaper sort of every day. So the scarcity will be of original thinking, of what creativity really is, right? So clients will pay a premium for breakthrough ideas, for real creativity. What they will not be willing to pay for is, pay a premium just because a large team worked on it, which they used to earlier. Reckitt was our global client. So the India CEO, he asked me one day that, when we have our meetings, you have some 14 people sitting from your end, right? One of them is presenting strategy. A couple of them are presenting work. You're doing a bulk of the talking. Why are there so many other people in the room? So I told him, because you're paying for them. Because if they're not in the room tomorrow, you'll ask me, why am I paying for them? But that is changing. That is going to change, because they're not going to pay a premium just because a big team is working.
What's your take on the expectations that clients have or brands have from their agencies, right? You needed 50 people to deliver 300 pieces of work. Today, it's not about output, right?
Correct.
It's increasingly becoming about outcomes. It is forcing agencies to commit the business goals, marketing objectives, and put their skin in that game, right? And it's your take on that shift.
I think you're absolutely right. It is about, like I said, it is about imagining a future for the brand that is bigger, and not just sort of reacting to information available. So
yes,
if it is about imagining a bigger future for the brand, then we need to find, as an agency, as a business, we need to find a model of ensuring that that is what is remunerated. If they're not willing to pay for our time, then they need to be willing to pay for our imagination.
What is the most widely held belief in the Indian agency business that you think is wrong?
I think it's the feeling that growth comes from adding services, right? It goes back to the point we were discussing earlier about large sort of networks, right? There is traditionally there's been a feeling that growth will come from adding services. I think the opposite is increasingly true. For quite some time now, agencies have sort of expanded relentlessly in terms of more capabilities, more vertical, more departments, more skill sets, more offerings, either through building them ground up or through acquisition. For two reasons.
Correct.
One, because in the short term, you feel they will add up to a bigger top line.
Correct.
Right. However, we have seen enough examples of how in the long term it creates a whole lot of issues for networks. And two is because they assume clients want one-stop shops. Right. I think the most successful firms will win going ahead because they stand for something very specific. They will be known for what they have chosen to do as much as what they have not chosen to do. So if you are an agency brand that has a very specific reason to exist and a very specific role that you can play in the life of the clients and their brands, you're likely to be chosen much faster than a shop that provides everything. Because the former sort of brings specialized knowledge to the table. It is leaner, it is cheaper compared to an agency that has sort of grown multiple skill sets and resources.
Correct. It extends the point that do few things but do them really well.
Correct.
Versus do many things.
Correct.
And do them
satisfactorily. See, even mid-sized agencies, when they hit a sort of a lean patch, they look for new things to do. How do I add? What are the new ways I can generate revenue? And therefore, you sort of keep adding what you can do instead of focusing your energies.
Where is the industry spending money that it need not spend?
Pitching. They're spending too much money pitching. Like I said, one agency wins and 12 others, but those 12 others have spent a lot of money trying to win that pitch. And if you multiply that with the number of pitches, that's a huge amount of money that could have been spent better.
Yep. There was a point not too long ago, and I was in charge of pitching and finding business and finding new business. I was still part of a network, and we were doing one pitch every 5 days, pan-India. The success rate is unreal.
Correct.
The burnout is insane.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Client retention rates are abysmally low. Because when your focus is divided between pitching and
work,
building brands, then there's only that much time you can give to building brands.
Describe a decision you made in the last 12 months that your peers would probably disagree with.
I'm sorry to sound repetitive, but not in the last 12 months, in the last 60 months. We have decided not to pitch like your life depends on it.
Which brings me to the flip side of that question, right? What would you stop doing tomorrow if you could, that you have not stopped as yet?
It's not just us, but I think the industry as a whole needs to do it. But because a lot of the marketing activity today exists because a process exists. A content calendar exists, or people exist who have to justify their existence, right? Not because an opportunity exists or an insight exists or a business problem exists, right?
Correct.
So if I could do, if it was one thing that I could sort of stop doing, it would be to waste a lot of the agency's efforts in creating and producing work that nobody will miss even if it didn't exist, right? But our retainer covers all of it. So create and produce, we must.
Where would you place your personal bet on the next 3 years that your agency's P&L does not reflect as yet?
I think going ahead, the one thing we are sure of is our bet will be on creating a couple of specialist offerings, right? Where the value of experience and insights is very high, right? I mean, for example, our first specialist agency is SNIF. We are in the process of launching it currently. It is going to be India's first specialist pet care agency. So, I mean, it is a category that has seen remarkable growth, and and is just the tip of the iceberg at this point. Pet care brands are sort of currently having to do with agencies that at best have some FMCG experience, right? Now, the decision involved in buying for human consumption and buying for the consumption of your pets is different in many ways, right?
Yeah.
And that's where sort of our expertise in pet and pet parent behavior that my co-founder in SNIF, Aarti, and her network of canine behaviorists and vets and allied services, coupled with our experience in brand building, is going to break. So that's one of the specialist offerings that we are building. The other one is still in the works. The P&L doesn't reflect it yet because it is just in the process of being launched.
What is the client need that does not exist yet, but you already see forming?
I think, like I said earlier, it is in the realm of, and that's going to define the relationship between the agency and the client as we go ahead. It will be in the realm of judgment rather than either information or sort of creativity and production, because the possibilities now are endless, right? Of what you can do. There is no sort of boundary to what you can do, right? Or what a brand can do. And there is no limit to the number of people who can work with the brand and do it for them, right?
Correct.
So in a situation where there is so much possible, there is so much that one can do, the decision on or the judgment of what the brand must do and must not do becomes most important, right? So
yes,
so brands will increasingly need partners who can sort of guide them on what are the things that the brand must. So judgment is going to become a very important sort of asset for agencies going ahead.
Would it be judgment or would it be conscience?
Both. The conscience ensures that your heart is in the right place.
Yeah.
Your judgment ensures that you can implement.
You do it financially correctly. Time, speed, effort.
Implement that.
Absolutely. What is the one piece of advice you would give someone who wants to join this industry?
It's very important for them to assess what their contribution is going to be, right? So what is it that they're joining the industry to do? Because what a new entrant in our business used to do, say 6 years ago or 10 years ago, let's say if you were in account management and you were starting as an account manager or as an account executive, you had a list of responsibilities, right? Now all of that can be done by AI, right? None of that is, whether it's taking minutes or it is creating job lists or creating a mechanism to follow up on work and so on and so forth. The entire area of work management, everything can be done by a machine.
Yeah.
So if you're joining as a young account manager, you need to be clear about what is it that your role is. How can you contribute meaningfully? Once you're clear about that, then jump in. It's the same with
Great.
a young creative person who is joining. There's no point joining an agency and then creating work using any of the AI engines mindlessly. So you will just end
Yeah.
up the great
Correct.
risk of
Correct.
using AI to create anything, whether it is thinking or it is work or creativity, is there is a big risk of becoming a slave to it, where you stop thinking because someone else is doing the thinking for you, right? And
Yep.
so that you do it once, it works for you, then you do it again, and then you do it a third time, and then it becomes your way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to think, someone else is going to do the thinking for me,
Will think.
right? Which is going
Correct.
to be disastrous for young people who join our business. They have to join this business because they want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And therefore, they have to find an environment where they'll be allowed to make that difference.
That was today's signal. If something here sharpened how you think, share it with one peer you think should hear it. Founders Circle Signal publishes every 2 weeks. To suggest a guest, write to the Ad Club Bangalore. I am Suneet John, back in 2 weeks with another voice worth transmitting.